What's up, everybody? As of August 17th, residential real estate in our country will never be the same. The new rules will take place regarding the NAR settlement, the National Association of Realtors, and the future of buyers' representation. A lot of people seem to be very confused about what will happen and are under the assumption that home buyers will benefit from these changes. Are you one of these people? Do you think the buyers will be better off? Comment below. I have to tell you, what I'm hearing is that the new rules will cause a lot of confusion and possibly create more distress for home buyers. So today, we're gonna break it all down for you. What will happen, how it works, and the possible downfalls. I'm not gonna try to convince you of anything, but I'm hoping after watching this video, you'll have more clarity on what this is all about. So let's dive right in. Before we get into the changes, let's quickly review how it is today. The way it is today is that a seller hires a realtor and their broker. They sign a listing agreement with that broker and the agent as their representative. The listing broker most often then offers compensation to the buyer's broker and advertises it on the MLS, the multiple listing service. The commission is published on the MLS and at present is considered a binding offer of compensation from the listing broker to the buyer's broker. What will happen August 17th is that the buyer broker compensation will no longer be allowed to be offered in our MLS. To be clear, sellers are still allowed to pay the buyer's broker's fees if they want, and it has been and always will be negotiable. Another requirement from the NAR settlement is that a buyer will have to have a buyer broker agreement signed with their agent, which states exactly what the buyer's agent fee is. It can be a percentage or a flat fee. Here's what the NAR agreement says. If you are a buyer and your agent is using an MLS, you will need to sign a written agreement with your agent before touring a home so you understand exactly what services will be provided and for how much. Written agreements are required for both in-person and live virtual home tours. You do not need a written agreement if you are just speaking to an agent at an open house or asking them about their services. The written agreement will include a specific and conspicuous disclosure of the amount or rate of compensation the real estate agent will receive or how this amount will be determined. Compensation that is objective, so $0, X flat fee, X percent, X hourly rate, and not open-ended. For example, it cannot be buyer broker compensation shall be whatever the amount the seller is offering to the buyer. This is important. A term that prohibits the agent from receiving compensation for brokerage services from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to in the agreement with the buyer, and a conspicuous statement that broker fees and commissions are fully negotiable and not set by law. In other words, the compensation has to be clear and the agent cannot receive more than what's been agreed upon in the buyer-broker agreement. So if a seller is offering more than the buyer's agent's agreement states, the buyer's agent doesn't get the difference. It's important to know this. This will be a big change because a lot of markets in our country at present don't use buyer-broker agreements. Here where I am in Maryland and DC, we've been using buyer-broker agreements for over 20 years, so we're kind of used to it. The main difference is that today, in July of 2024, my buyer agency agreement may say X% compensation to my broker, but 99% of the time, the seller has agreed to pay it. It's advertised in the MLS, and like I said, today in July, it is binding. There's always a chance that I find a buyer a FSBO, a for sale by owner, and then the buyer does pay it if the seller won't. In post-August 17th world, the buyer will have a buyer-broker agreement with their agent and will agree on a fee. And like we said earlier, it can be a percentage, it can be a flat fee, any of those things, and they will have to pay it. The intention from the NAR settlement is to put the buyer's agency's fees in the buyer's hand. To be perfectly clear, the seller can still offer to give a buyer a concession and advertise that in the MLS, and it will be up to the buyer what they want to do with the money. They can choose to pay their agent with it, but it needs to be in the contract and agreed to by all parties. The concession is not a binding offer from the seller to the buyer. Just because the seller is offering it, it doesn't mean they have to give it. It all needs to be negotiated in the purchase contract. A seller can also offer the buyer's broker's fee on the listing broker's website, just not on the MLS. So that's about the gist of it. Now let's talk about who it affects and what problems I can see happening as a result of these new rules. Like I said, if you have any questions so far, just put them in the comments. Let's start with the buyers. No one is forced to use a realtor, and yet most buyers do. According to the National Association of Realtors, 89% of home buyers used a realtor to help them through the process in our country in 2023. It's usually the biggest transaction of their life, and they want somebody with experience and success to navigate them through the process, especially for first-time buyers. It's not just about finding the house, it's about negotiating the contract, getting you through inspections, getting you through appraisals, making sure your loan's okay, all that stuff. I can list 50 things that buyer's agent does, but that's not the purpose of this video. You should always ask your buyer's agent what exactly they will do for you. What is their value? Ask the hard questions. Ask them about their past experiences, and even ask them for referrals from past clients so you can vet them just like you would do for any professional. Now, I just need to put it out there that every market is different. I know in New York, for example, real estate agents just show the properties and the attorneys write the contracts. Where I am here in the DC area, the agents are the ones that are working with clients, writing the contracts on approved forms, negotiating the offers, and ratifying them. It's very seldom that I do see a lawyer in a real estate transaction here, except for the settlement attorney, but they only represent the contract, not the buyer or the seller. There's no shame in wanting help. So if you are one of these people, here's what's in store for you. After August 17th, you will have to negotiate the fee between you and your agent. Once you have agreed on that fee, you will be responsible for paying it at closing. It's already so expensive to buy a house right now between high interest rates and high home prices. The thought that a buyer has to come up with additional money, especially a first-time buyer, to have representation against the seller who already has representation, it just seems like a lot. So what are your options if you want representation but you can't afford it? You can ask your realtor to only show you properties where sellers are offering concessions and then use that seller concession to pay your broker. This is a little tricky because you'll never really know if those seller concessions are accepted until you put it in the offer. By the way, you can always ask the seller to pay your agent in the contract regardless if they're offering seller concessions. It would be similar to a normal market back in the day when buyers would ask the sellers to help them with their closing costs. We haven't seen that in a while because the market is so competitive in most areas. Which brings me to another tricky part. If the house you want has multiple offers on it and your offer has a seller concession in it, but another offer doesn't, you will be at a disadvantage. For those buyers who will forego representation, just be aware that the seller's agent has a loyalty and a fiduciary relationship with their client, not you. As for the sellers, they're gonna have to decide how they want to market their home because a seller concession will be a part of marketing. If the seller wants to attract as many buyers as possible, they will offer concessions so every buyer will have an opportunity to buy their house, regardless if that buyer can pay their own agent. If a seller only wants to pay their own agent, well, they can do that. And the buyers that have extra money to pay their own buyer's agents will be the ones who are able to buy their house. It's complicated and messy. And finally, let's talk for a second about realtor haters, because I know you're out there. You're probably watching this. You're entitled to your opinion. And like in any profession, there are good and bad realtors. Do I think a lot of realtors will leave the business? I don't know. There have always been discount agents that offer rebates and will work for less. It's really up to the buyer what kind of representation they want, if any. I mean, you get what you pay for. If realtors had no value, then why do they exist? There have been other disruptions in the past, iBuyers and discount brokers, and yet full-service realtors still have careers helping people. There may be a reason for that, besides the rhetoric I keep hearing that realtors are useless and they're door openers and they make boatloads of money for doing nothing. If it was that easy and you are one of those people that think that, I have a question for you. Why haven't you gotten your real estate license and made that boatloads of money for doing nothing? Comment below. I'll wait. In all seriousness, one thing I don't think that's going to happen is that I do not think that these changes are going to make home prices go down. Sellers will price their homes by looking at the comps and their own particular motivation, and appraisers will do the same. We already have a huge affordability problem with our housing market, and my fear is that this will only make things worse for home buyers, especially first-time buyers. Personally, I've been a realtor for 21 years. Yes, I am that old. I've been through a lot of changes, and some markets were easier and some markets were more difficult and more challenging. We'll get through these changes too. I personally just worry about those buyers who want representation but can't afford it. So in all seriousness, besides the haters out there, what do you guys think? Was this video clear? Do you have any questions? If you do, please ask them below and I will try to answer them, because I know this can be confusing and it is a big disruption in our real estate market. So I'm just trying to help you out. Thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Bye.